We'll be going over the two variations of open-faced Chinese poker, the pineapple version and the turbo version. Pineapple open-faced Chinese poker is played between 2 to 3 players, and in turbo it can be played between 2 to 4 players. Like traditional open-faced Chinese poker, both variations use a standard 52-card poker deck, and dealing begins with each player receiving 5 cards and arranging them anywhere within the 3 rows, the back, middle, and top. Placement is all dependent on strategy preference, with the objective being to make the best qualifying 13-card OFC poker hand. In order to make a qualifying OFC poker hand, your back row must be greater than the middle row, and your middle row must be greater than the top row using the standard poker hand rankings. In Pineapple, after the opening 5-card dealing is complete, each player receives 3 cards, but only selects 2 of the 3 to arrange anywhere within their rows, then discards the final card. This subsequent round is the main difference between the variations of open-faced Chinese poker. In the standard version, each player would only receive 1 card to arrange, and in Turbo, each player would receive 4 cards and place all 4 cards anywhere within the 3 rows. After the initial 5-card dealing process is complete, the subsequent 3-card round continues until every player has arranged 13 open-face cards. Any player whose final hand does not qualify by following the back, greater than middle, greater than top rule will immediately foul. So let's take a look at each player's final hands. In my hand, the 4 of a kind in the back row beats the flush in the middle row, which beats the high ace in the top row, so my hand qualifies. The other player has a full house in the back row, which beats the 2 pair in the middle row, and in turn beats the high queen in the top row. Therefore, his hand also qualifies. After determining if there are any fouling hands, each player compares their rows to their opponents and tallies his or her points. A player receives 1 point for each row won, plus any additional royalty points. Royalty points can be won when your top row is greater than a pair of 6s, when your middle row is greater than a 3 of a kind, or when your back row is greater than a straight. To illustrate the point system, let's take a look at each player's cards in this game. Starting with the top row, the high ace in my hand beat my opponent's high queen for 1 point. In the middle row, my flush of clubs beat my opponent's 2 pair for another point. I also received royalty points. Referring back to the royalty points chart, you receive double the amount of points won in the back row for the middle row. So in this case, my flush granted me 8 royalty points, which in turn is subtracted from my opponent's points. Moving on to the back row, my 4 of a kind beat the other player's full house for 1 point. Also, we both received royalty points. The 4 of a kind in my back row granted me 10 points, and the full house in the other player's back row granted him 6 royalty points. Because both of us received royalty points, we determined the final points won or lost by subtracting the difference. In this case, I won 4 royalty points, whereas he lost 4. I also received 3 additional points for scooping my opponent, or winning all 3 rows. In conclusion, I won this round for a total of 18 points, whereas my opponent lost this round for 18 points. After the initial 5-card dealing process is complete, the subsequent 4-card round continues until every player has arranged 13 open-face cards. Again, any player whose final hand does not qualify by following the back, greater than middle, greater than top rule will immediately foul. This player's high king in the back row did not beat the 2 pair in the middle row, so he fouls. In my hand, the 3 of a kind in the back row beat the high ace in the middle row, and the high ace beat the high king in the top row, so I'm safe. Now in this player's hand, although the 3 of a kind beat the high queen in the middle row, the high queen did not beat the pair of 7s in the top row. Therefore, this player also fouls. Because both players fouled, I instantly won all 3 rows from both players for a total of 3 points from each player. I also won an additional 3 bonus points from each player for scooping them, or winning all 3 rows. In conclusion, I won this round for a total of 12 points, whereas both of my opponents lost this round for a total of 6 points each. Because open-faced Chinese poker uses a point system, players can agree on X amount of dollars per point or X amount of play chips per point. For instance, in this game, if we agreed on $1 per point, I would win $18 and my opponent would lose $18. If we agreed on 5 play chips per point, I would win 90 play chips and my opponent would lose 90 play chips. Game stakes are all dependent on player agreement.